This session is called The Academy Presents Women at the Helm, and we have an incredible lineup of award-winning women directors here with us today. Kimberly Pierce is the director behind films like Carrie and Boys Don't Cry, Haifa Al-Mansour, director of Wajda and Mary Shelley, which is screening at DIF, Nikki Caro, director of Whale Rider and North Country, and Anne-Marie Jasser will be moderating, and she directed Rejib, which is also screening this year at DIF. Please give them a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a really pleasure to be here at the festival this year. It's my 14th year at this festival. I was at the first DIF. And it's really nice to see that how it's grown and the interest here. I'm also happy to see some men in the audience. Not enough, but that men came to this. Should be more. And I'm really happy to sit with these great women who have all made films that have had a major mark on the cinematic landscape for feature filmmaking and for independent filmmaking. And there's a lot to say here, and there's some really great stories, and I think we're all very interested in knowing a lot of different things. So what I'd like to do is have a conversation and then open it up to the audience, because I think a lot of you probably have some questions for the filmmakers. So Kim, I'd love to start with you. Because you're 1999, Boys Don't Cry, which was a landmark film in many ways. And I would love to hear from you, because I think, from what I know, is that you were working on another project when you changed directions. And I think we would love to hear maybe a little bit about where you were coming from, how you started, and that journey into going into Boys Don't Cry.
Okay, and I'm really honored to be here and among these fascinating, amazing women, so thank you. Well, I was very lucky. Pretty early on, as a kid, I just made things, and I filmed and drew, and I had the good fortune of living in different countries, so I kind of had learned a lot about different cultures. When I got to Colombia, where you went, I was fascinated by, there was a woman who was African American, and she, during the Civil War, they were locking up anybody with what they called black blood. And so she passed as a man, she was a Southerner, she passed as a Northerner, and became a spy. And she was amazing, and she ended up spying on this guy in the South, brought him down during our Civil War, and ultimately was dishonored by the country, even though she had been a hero, became a heroin addict, and then went around the country telling her story. So she was amazing. But the long story short is, I had found her history I was at Columbia in the history archives, and as I tried to tell the story, I had a writing teacher who actually happened to have been a lesbian, and she said, you don't want to tell the story of somebody who passes as a man because they want to survive, which is what she did. You want to tell the story of somebody who passes as a man because it's who they are. And I said, oh God, well now I don't have a thesis project. So I threw the project out, and it was strange. This happens to me sometimes. I just had a problem, and the problem became the solution. It was probably 2 months later that I read this extraordinary article in what we call the Village Voice, which was an amazing publication in New York. And it, just to put it briefly, because I want to hear from all these other guys, it was the amazing story of a person who was born, we say, as a female, biologically as a female, but believed and wanted to live as a man and wanted to love women. So that was based on who they were. And I started writing the story, and then very quickly, this same teacher said to me, well, you have to choose. Either this person wants to live as a man, or this person wants to love and sleep with women. And she said, your problem, Kim, is you love the truth. You love true stories. And I said, I do love true stories. And she said, but sometimes drama is not the truth. So you have to surrender your attachment to the truth and tell the right story. So pick one. And I tried. And I went back to her and I said, okay, I'm a failure. I can't pick between these two. Neither one is more important. And it was very difficult choosing which one, and it's kind of a screenwriting exercise, because I would ask people, what would you do in that position? What is the greater need? Well, I was very fortunate. I went to Sundance, and I met an amazing man named Frank Pearson, who is one of the great storytellers. He wrote Cool Hand Luke. He also wrote Dog Day Afternoon. And I asked Frank, and Frank was great, because he
Sorry, you went to Sundance in the writing lab?
Yeah, writing and directing lab. And it was a continuation, and that's what I want to encourage all of you to constantly learn. I met extraordinarily gifted people, and Frank said to me, I think in 3 acts. That's what he said about himself. And I was like, I want to think in 3 acts. So he became one of my mentors. And I said to him, Frank, what is Brandon's need? Is it to be with women, or is it to live as a man? And Frank was like, it's neither. I was like, ay, this is just terrible, right? And he said, his need is the same as Sonny's need. Has anybody seen Dog Day Afternoon? Of course, yeah. Okay, you all have to see it. And the beautiful thing about this is a kind of screenwriting lesson. I was like, well, what's Sonny's need? And I knew the movie very well. And he's like, why does he take the women to the bathroom when they have to pee? There's a bunch of women, they're from Brooklyn, and they're like, well, you have to pee. And he's robbing a bank, so he shouldn't let them go to the bathroom. And so Frank said, why does he let them go? And I realized, to get love. So that was the extraordinary thing about what Frank did for me, was he helped me understand what the life need was that drove the character, and I was able to throw out a lot of things that didn't work and finally shape the movie to make it work. And if we have more time, we can get into how I financed it and all that. But that, I think, is a pretty seminal thing about how I understood that movie. And I continued on that way, and these guys will talk about it with their movies, it's 100,000 decisions from the moment that you fall in love with a story and you want to build a character and you want to make a movie. And it's the highest level of persistence and commitment to doing it well and serving the movie, I think, just gets you through it. And then you make something, hopefully, that's any good. So.
Just to ask, what year was that you did the lab? Like how much time had passed?
I was very fortunate. Brandon was killed in December of '93. By '94, I was on a plane with a number of transsexuals, interviewing them. And then I think it was about 2 years. And I was very fortunate, and I encourage all of you guys, if you can get involved with Sundance. There's a woman named Michelle Satter who sought me out and asked me, to tell her why I loved this story. And clearly I was like a crazy, passionate kid. And they brought me in, and I got to do the writing, the directing, and the producing lab. And I learned so much, so much. But you always do. You learn from so many people, and, so.
Nikki?
Hello.
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 Also similar, Whale Rider is a very ambitious first film.
I suppose so. Second film, actually. And really, the whale thing, is that what you're talking about in terms of ambitious? Yeah, because we only had $12.50, and a little girl had to ride a whale. So we made the big head of a whale, and we made a body of the whale, and we had a whole bunch of tiny little fiberglass whales. And you would be amazed at how real. You walk up to them on the beach and that looks like a piece of fiberglass. But when you surrounded them with people who consider themselves to be the descendants from whales, when they see these pieces of fiberglass as the dying and deceased members of their own tribe, and the emotion that they come to that with, that was so strong, that was so emotional. And it sort of took, the ambition all the way out of it. The experience for me really was very similar to Kim's, in that in this story, it was very kind of seminal story for me to tell as a New Zealander, was also, the telling of it was very much my story as a filmmaker. There's a little girl who's so desperate to prove to her grandfather that she is the leader of their tribe. And what she needs more than anything else is his love. But he can't give it because she's a little girl. Meanwhile, as a filmmaker, there was a tremendous amount of controversy about me directing this Māori story because it's not my culture. I'm white New Zealander, I'm not Māori. And even though I took it more seriously, I think, than I've taken anything else ever, I was learning the language. I was doing everything I could to love and respect this story. It wasn't until the chief of the tribe came in, there was a very damning article about me in the press, and he came in and he said, listen, you have to understand two things. Firstly, we have chosen you to tell our story, and that's all you need. But also, you need to be a chief about this. So I realized that the story of the little girl was my story also. And I was so desperate for the love of the people whose story it was, but they couldn't give it to me. So I knew, like little Pi does in the movie, that if I could just do my work, then the work would speak for me. And it did. You know, the movie is beloved. And I learnt a tremendous amount about being a filmmaker with that story. The story is really, it's about being a leader. It's all it's about. And that's what we are when we make movies.
Can we step a little bit further back? I mean, before you came to that point with the script, it's how did you come to this story to begin with?
It came to me. It's a novella in New Zealand written by a very, very well-known and respected Māori author. And it's a little book that gets taught in schools, actually. It's about this thin. And it had been in development for about 10 years. And there was a pile of scripts. Literally, it was like right up my leg. It was in, and I was approached about it, and I said, look, I don't want to read any of your scripts, but I will read that little book. And I read the book, and I said yes. And so strange, the day I said yes was the day that a whale stranded on the beach where my house is. So, if any of you have seen Jane Campion's movie, The Piano? Yeah, okay, so that's where my house was. And so it's a very desolate, you know, miles and miles and miles of black sand. And it so happened that a whale stranded on that day. And I couldn't believe it, because these strandings will happen once every 20 to 30 years. And so I ran down and I was with the whale before they took it away. And I rang my best friend who's Māori, and I said to him, look, this is a really bad sign, right? I can't do this movie. And he said, no, this is where you have it wrong. Culturally and historically, if a whale stranded on your beach, that was a sign of abundance. Because you could have the meat, the oil, the bones for weapons, the teeth. And it was, in fact, a sign of huge abundance for me, because the movie changed my life. It certainly changed my career, but it taught me lots of really good things about being a human being.
Haifa, you are someone who needs no introduction in this room. I think everybody, I wanted to talk about them with their earlier films, but Haifa, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think a lot of us know the story of Wejda and how it started and where it came from and how the struggle to make it happen. I think everybody is kind of curious about going from Wejda to Mary Shelley. So would you love to hear some thoughts?
Yeah, when I finished Wejda, I went back and I started looking for scripts and all that, and my agents and started sending me stuff because I wanted to do an English speaking. I wanted to make the jump. We don't have industry in Saudi Arabia, so for me, I wanted to plug myself into an industry. And then they sent me Mary Shelley, and I was like, what? Mary Shelley, English woman, period. I'm a girl from Saudi Arabia, do they know that? And then I took the script, and it was amazing. It was about a girl who was trying to find her voice in a very conservative culture. And it reminded me a lot about Wejda. She's feisty, and she wants to have her own voice. And she wrote an amazing piece of literature. It's a legacy. And a lot of people think it's a man who wrote that because it is masculine, it's brave, it questions a lot of philosophy in our world. And I just fell in love with her, and I wanted to tell her story because I think it's important for us as women to celebrate womanhood all across, and I just connected with the story. And for me, it is, when I pick a project, it's very important to have that relationship with your main character. If you don't find something that you can feel and like in your heart, that is that you can be that person, you can feel their pain, you can feel their happiness, you can feel where they can go with their journey, that you can do it justice. So yeah, and it was a really long journey to find financing. It's exactly like Wajda, again. Meeting with people, we don't have money, and we waited so much. So we waited a lot to get the finances all together, and we got it it was a co-production, we got a little bit from the US, we got from England, and from all the places in the world. Luxembourg has a big fund for money, but Luxembourg does not look like England at all. And we were just like, and we got the money from Ireland. And Ireland was amazing because people in Ireland, like it looks like England, but they are not very precious about their buildings and anything. So you go to an amazing like castle, it's just like, yeah, you can paint it. What? After scouting in London, it was like, yeah, it's amazing. So we did a lot of the exterior in Ireland, and we had to build a studio in Luxembourg. So our protagonist, Elle, would literally open half of the scene, open the door in Ireland, and we will get it in Luxembourg. So it was a lot for us to match. It was challenging in that way to bring the actors and the same mindset and like match parts and pieces. We had an amazing art designer, so he did a great job making that studio really look like what we had, matching it up. And yeah, it was a really wonderful journey, and we had very young cast because Mary Shelley, and a lot of people don't know that she wrote the book when she was 18. So we had a lot of 18 years old, Elle and Douglas Booth and Belle, and they just like have a lot of energy, and I feel old like coming to the set, and they are singing and dancing, and so it is really nice to be with young actors, and yeah.
And what was it like for you to I mean, I know that Wajda had an international crew, but you're cast to work with actors in English, in another language, not in Arabic. Was it different for you? Was it the same? Was it?
The language, aside from Elle is American, and she has to make a British accent, so we had someone to monitor that because there's no way I can understand that. I cannot correct the accent. But it wasn't like really, it wasn't really the language that was different. It is the amount of freedom. Like in Saudi Arabia, I was filming in a van because it's a segregated country, so I wasn't able to there. But like there, just like, tell the actors what you want to do, and they will jump to it. And this is amazing for me as an artist to have that space, like to be able just to engage with my art, and I'm not like trying to walk the line or do anything. Like we have to be very specific in our cultures, but that for me it was amazing to have that kind of freedom. And then I dealt with like non-professional actors with Wajda, so it was a different kind of process, like during casting where you have to rely a lot of the essence of your actor and person you're casting. But it is amazing to see when people have a craft, like Elle is an amazing actress, like they bring in, they take the lines and everything to a whole different level. And that was for me also like a privilege as a director, like to be engaging with actors on that level, so yeah.
Are there any questions so far? Anybody? Yeah, go ahead, please. Is there a mic for the audience? Thank you. Or you can have a loud voice. Oh, here it comes. Here it comes.
Thank you. Afnan Linjawi, I'm a screenwriter, scriptwriter from Saudi Arabia, Jeddah. And I remember when your movie came out, everyone in Saudi Arabia wanted to see it. We couldn't see it because it wasn't screened internally, and I am from Effat University, so I also fought to get the movie screened at least in Effat. And watching the movie, I learned a lot about a different kind of family in Saudi Arabia, because there were so many things that I connected with, Wajda herself, and also like her family, and the things they went through were new to me. So I was like, oh, maybe, these people do exist in my community, and I don't know about them. But I've always wanted to ask you personally, how did you decide to take that, field and direction in your life? And also, do you have an interest to support the local talent and the people that are trying to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, of course. I would love to support Saudi female screenwriters. Power to women, yes. No, and I think, and thank you so much for all your work in screening Wajda and Affat. I love Affat University. It is one of the very amazing places that cultivate women talent in Saudi Arabia, and it is like, yeah. So how I decided to become a director in Saudi Arabia, like, when you grow up, I grew up in a small town in Saudi Arabia, and it is very hard for me to have a voice. I felt always invisible. And it wasn't like because of me or anything, it's just like the culture. And I wanted a voice. And when I was a kid, we عندنا الإذاعة الصباحية, morning broadcast in school. And I used to write plays that are very boring and very preachy. You know what it is, like you have to do this, and so I used to write them. But I had so much fun directing the girls and doing it, and it gave me so much like that kind of happiness as a kid. When I graduated and finished college and I started working, the culture itself started weighing on me. So I wanted to go to that space where I'm happy. So I wrote a very bad short film. And I sent it to Abu Dhabi. Like they have Emirate Film Competition at the time, and they invited me. I was just like, all of a sudden I'm important, people. Like someone is giving me a ticket to travel. So that was really nice, like to go and I started seeing Anne-Marie Jasser and people, and there is another space that I felt happy again and gave me that voice.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Hi, my question, I guess, is for everyone. In terms of finding mentors, Kimberly, you spoke about finding a mentor. Do you find that it's easier to find female mentors now, or was it hard when you guys were starting out to find female mentors? Do you think it's more important to find a female mentor or to find a mentor in general who can help you get to a certain place? Just, I go to several panels like this, and mentorship is frequently used as is given as a suggestion, as a tool for moving forward and learning skill sets, but it's also relatively hard to find female mentors because a lot of us are in the same place.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. There's an ongoing debate now about how you make more opportunities for women, because typically men have had most of the power and men mentor other men. And men basically will say, oh, I think this has been written about, why don't I hire that guy because he reminds me of a young me? That's happened a lot. And so it's like, well, what happens if like you're a girl and you don't remind some dude of a young him? You know what I mean? What you gonna do? So we're all aware of that. And in fact, there's something called Reframe, which is a thing that I'm involved in. It's Sundance Institute and Women in Film in LA. I don't know if you guys know about it, but you should be a part of it. It's so great. 3 years ago, we got together with a bunch of people who were like leaders in the industry, heads of studios, actors, writers, directors, and we spent a day and a half looking at all these other industries and figuring out how they overcame the systemic obstacles to women working. And some of them have succeeded, I think, like in banking. And we kind of applied that to Hollywood so that we didn't wake up, which we were finding, like once every 2 years, everybody would say the statistics suck, and then we would try to do something, and then it would kind of fall apart. So we figured if we all got together, kind of interdisciplinary across fields, which is something I really love and agree with, which is have the actors, have the studio heads, have everybody work together. So, and one of the things that I was really passionate about, because I had gone to Sundance, and whenever I see the head of Sundance, I always say, can I come back? And she's like, no. You get to come once. And I'm just like, why? Because it was so helpful. So I've always said, can we have like the mid-career lab so that we can do again in our mid-careers what we did in the beginning? And so I helped create a mentorship program. But I would say to you, look, I think for me, and I'm curious what these guys think, one of the reasons I told that first story is, like, I have been very lucky. I've had some of the greatest teachers ever. They've been men, they've been women, but I feel like I'm always being mentored throughout my career. Like, I have a lot of director friends, and I go visit their sets, you know? So, like, I'll go, I mean, I was fortunate to go shadow Scorsese at some point, but if it's not him, my friend Lynn Shelton is brilliant, and she's a comedian. Well, I end up going to sets and visiting my friends and learn that way, or, you know, I work with, you know, John at the Academy, and there's so many people there who teach me. So I really think you have to kind of think of, I would think, as being an artist, it's like a lifelong vocation of constantly learning from everybody around you, you know, and it takes a lot for somebody to mentor you.
Oh, I'm the opposite. I came from New Zealand, and there were no mentors. There were none, and I've only recently got one, actually, and he's amazing. And where was he all those years? But I am one, and I think that's really important. I've never been on another person's set, actually, ever. Yeah.
You've never been on another director's set?
No, never done that.
Me too. We'll come to your set.
Yeah, we're coming.
Come to my set.
In fact, everybody. But I think everything Kim says is right about our underrepresentation in this industry and how hard it is. I just want to acknowledge how many obstacles will be thrown in your path because you are a woman, okay? I'm very realistic about that. But I'd also say to you, this is what they won't tell you. They can't actually stop you. Yeah, you can tell your stories, yeah. And you can bail out at any time, but they can't stop you if you're passionate, and you have to be. Because it's, you know, we can't all do this. There's just not enough room for everybody to do this job. So the people that can build a career for themselves are the people that are very passionate and persistent and kind. I mean, I think that's really important too, that you just can't kind of muscle through being unkind to people. As women, I think we know that you get more out of people if you treat them well than if you treat them badly. So there's lots of subtle and unsubtle differences about being female filmmaker, but I say all power to you. Yeah, I look forward to seeing your films.
And you should take it from Nikki. She's directing Mulan very soon. Like, she's one of the few women who made it to the 100 million budget, so yeah. We're very proud of her, proud of women breaking out, and it is really amazing. It's really amazing for the Academy to host us, like, and to give women that chance to speak and to stand up for themselves. And I've been in your place where it is really far. You feel you're away, and where you don't know where to break into. Like, you want a mentor, and you want. I come from Saudi Arabia, the farthest place from cinema in the world. But I used to write emails to people like, my name is Helm Mansour. I wrote emails to everybody. Sundance, I bothered them to death. Michelle Sarah, she is like, sorry, unfortunately you didn't make it to this lab. It's like, all right, next year. So you have to have this persistence, and you have to find opportunities and fight for them. The world is so small now. It is not like before. You are so far away, and so just like, you need that passion. And if you have an idea and you are in love with it, don't ever give up.
Thank you. I love what you guys said. I love it. And it's true. I'm like Haifa. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I'm not from Saudi Arabia. And Palestine, and we come from places also with, there are no mentors. And a lot of people in this room, I think, are coming from places that the film industry is something new, and there are no mentors. And persistence. I was so annoying. I mean, I get rejected, and I just apply next year. And like, stop, you can't apply again. You just keep, you know what, people think you're annoying. You have to do it because no one else is going to do it. No one else is going to do it for you. No one else is going to fight for you. You have to fight, and who cares what people say, and you make your dream happen. It's totally true. It's about persistence and a work ethic. Like, work your ass off. And we have to work harder as women, that's true. But it doesn't matter. You do it, and it'll happen.
And there's something I want to add, which is, I think if you can get into this mindset, which I think I'm always was, but I kind of understand now more, that the problem is the solution in a really weird way. I found so many times, like with boys, that problem of I didn't know what the need was. And even my professors didn't know. But I think part of the persistence then took me to a place that was so unusual that then the way I told the story was so correct and unusual because it had been a problematic story. And I would say that as women, the problem is it is going to be impossible, right? You're going to have to work 20 times as hard and be so much better, and you're not going to get the opportunities that you deserve. And yet, you will, if you keep doing it, probably tell stories differently than they have ever been told. And we live in the thing is, storytelling is human nature, right? So if you don't have the best mentorship, or you don't have the right equipment, or you don't have whatever, tell the damn story. Because you're going to tell it in a way that's never been told, and that people want. They want something new. So I think in a way, just embrace your limitations and your problem as you.
And also your femaleness, because I do believe we're on a really exciting frontier of storytelling because our stories haven't been told by us. And so, you know, you already have an audience that's craving to have their stories told. It's exciting.
I wanted to add to what you guys are saying about feminism, just kind of also that to remember that we all, as women as well, need to also help each other out, because I find living in LA as a filmmaker, I'm half Middle Eastern, but I wanted to add and say that, like, I find that most of the times I get to be on big sets, it's usually the women that are kind of catty to other women, and I think we need to also remind each other to help each other out and mentor each other as women, because I find that generally the men tend to be a little nicer to us as well than the women producers, especially, not to insult anybody, but I do find that women producers are kind of tough on us, and usually kind of come from a place of judgment. And I also wanted to add to Frank Pearson being an amazing mentor. He was my mentor at AFI, actually my teacher at AFI, and God rest his soul, and he was amazing. Guys that haven't seen his films, please do watch them. And I also wanted to ask Kimberly a question about kind of coming from the lesbian gay community, what are your strides to kind of push that further, because of there's so much movement happening in that, and also in feminism and what's happening in Hollywood and transparency, and just kind of being here in a place where it is illegal to be gay or lesbian. Like, I really commend you for coming here and, you know, like standing up and doing the work that you have done, and I'm just kind of curious where that's going, if that's going anywhere, and if you're pushing to kind of help the situation in countries like the Middle East where it is still illegal.
Well, you asked quite a question.
Part one, part two, part three, go.
So let's try to distill what do you think the big question is that you would like me to address? Because I would like to answer something in particular. Is it, to try to refine it, because you brought up so many good points. What do you think other than me just to generally talk about this subject?
I think maybe most, to rephrase it, maybe your how you feel responsibility to push further in like feminism and in the lesbian gay community with your films, like the responsibility that you feel in your message. Because I think as filmmakers, that's the most important thing, is it's such a manipulative, powerful tool to teach people, and we all have responsibilities to give everybody a profound experience. So where does that kind of come from for you?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting, and I want to hear what these women have to say too. I actually was very much against ever having a sense of responsibility when I became an artist. I thought if I had a message and I had a sense of responsibility, I would not be a great storyteller. So that to me was just, it very much confused me as a younger person. So when I made Boys Don't Cry, I was so massively in love with Brandon. Like, I literally, it was like I had adopted a child. I loved this person so much. I went to the murder town, I went to the murder trial. I was crazy obsessed. So, and you know, it was funny, Christine Vachon, my producer, at some point was like, the rape is too violent. You know, you have too much of an appetite for violence, right? Because I had been to the murder trial. And she said, your audience can't take it. I can't swear, right? No, I don't want to do anything offensive. I was just, so I was like, you know, screw the audience. There's an F word that goes with that. I was just like, right? Like, screw the audience. I don't really care that they should be able to take it because Brandon went through this. So I was very rebellious and didn't have any sense of obligation to anybody but myself. Over the course of editing that movie, we edited the rape scene 7 times, and I sat with an audience, and I learned how not to pornographize violence. And it became part of kind of how my calling works, which is I never want to put on something on screen that could ever brutalize a woman or encourage anybody to ever hurt a woman. or any human being. So over the course of becoming an artist, I started taking on a mantle of responsibility kind of de facto. I didn't aim for it, right? Kind of like the unlikely hero. So over time, I now speak very much about pornography of violence. I will not be a participant in it. I now, it's interesting, when I first made Boys, people said, is there sexism in the industry? And I said, absolutely not, look at me. Well, that was the biggest mistake I ever could have made, which is, and I was talking with these women, just because I made it, or she made it, or she made it, or she made it, does not mean that there's not a systemic problem. So over time, I took on the mantle of being a feminist. And now that's why, you know, if I sound like I'm involved in these different things, it's like, yeah, I'm on the academy, you know, I'm a governor, I'm on the board of the Directors Guild of America. I am very political, I am very protective of women. I fight so much because I care so much about humanity, but I'll fight for all people, people of color, I'll fight for women, I'll fight for queers. So, and as I get older, I just care more and more because I think I'm ultimately a storyteller, and that's the story of humanity that I am involved in. And if I can make it better, I want to. Now you asked about the queer thing. I don't know how public one should be. I mean that.
Here?
Yeah. I don't know if it's safe. I'm not really sure.
You're
but,
free to do what
okay,
you want.
I've never
We'll
been...
just get like a rated R, you know.
Yeah, right. I've never been
16 over.
closeted. It would be very hard to put me in any closet because I would just come out of it somehow. In all my different, anybody who knows, I'm, you know, I've had a very rich, varied life. So you ask about that in terms of Hollywood. What's very interesting, I sat in the Academy room the other day, because, you know, we're having all this stuff about, and I'm really proud that we're dealing with harassment really head on. We just, you know, released a code of ethics that I am super proud of. And we're creating a museum, which is amazing. And at some point, I looked around and I said, wow, I'm fighting the feminist fight. I'm always fighting for women in these rooms, but I've given up the queer fight. And it's partly because as a queer person, whether you're bisexual, you're a lesbian, whatever you are, you assimilate very well. I mean, I think because I have short hair, it's pretty obvious partly what's going on, but it's not always obvious to everybody. But it's interesting to me that in these rooms, I fight for women, but I don't fight for gays. And a lot of gay people are coming up to me recently saying, we're not represented. They're representing people of color, they're representing women, they're not representing us. So I spoke to, you know, the people, because I'm on the museum committee, and I was like, wow, I not only want to push for gay stuff, but I want to push for sexuality. And that's a whole thing that's very interesting in American culture. You know, you can shoot someone in the head. I didn't get an X for shooting Brandon in the head, I got an X for an orgasm that went on too long. So there, I said the one word. I won't say it again. But we're against sexuality in the representation of in our culture, and in our media it's always been a problem. So that's something I'm really fighting for. But partly because we just had such a fun discussion. She watched a television show I directed. I don't know if I should say the name. It's called I Love Dick. But it's not about that. But anyway, but Nikki, but it was Jill Soloway who does Transparent, which you all must respect because it's great. And it was beautiful. At breakfast, Nikki said it went too far, in a way, right? And it was so amazing because it deals with, I won't get into exactly, but it deals with sexuality and it deals with female desire, and it goes too far because we're so used to it not going far enough. So that's a little bit of my answer, which is I am so political now, but on a human level, just because I care so much. That's just where my life has taken me.
I just wanted to add that you are still standing up for it because you are here right now and you represent a movie that maybe now it's not as significant, but in the time that your movie came out, like that was a huge significance in America to lesbian, gay, right?
The movie?
Yeah. Boys Don't Cry. I'm saying like in the 90s, that was a huge, powerful move. And now you're here, which is kind of where it's kind of like the next step is kind of bringing that to where people understand it more in countries like this, you know, just so that they can be more open-minded to stuff.
Well, again, I would go back to what everybody in this panel is saying. I just told a story about me and about the way I was living in my culture. And I had understanding of my culture. And that was what my friends and I were doing. So I think we all kind of have, you know, grabbed our place in the world and then told that story.
Please, the woman in white. Oh. The
Thank
other
you.
woman in white.
Oh. Is it me?
No, it was her. But, yeah.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you all for being here. Haifa, I did email you 5 years ago. You never responded. I'm going to email you again. I'm going to keep emailing.
What's your name so I respond this time?
She was busy.
No, what's your name?
Sarah Barghim. I'm from Saudi Arabia.
Yes. Oh, Sarah! I got that in here.
It's okay, you don't have to remember me. I have a question for all of you. In the early days of your career, did you have to ever sacrifice, the way you direct or the way you write because the men or the people who you work for asked you to do it in a certain way? And then how did that affect you in the long term?
Nikki, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, no. But I grew up pretty scrappy, and I developed an idea very, very early that old white guys weren't going to tell me what to do, from a little girl. And so, that's continued. But again, it's sort of about finding your voice, I think. If you can find that really clear, strong thing that you're saying, then you become less susceptible to other people's opinions. Which is not to say you shouldn't listen to other people, particularly when they're smart. It's an interesting thing to learn as an artist and a filmmaker, is when to hold on to your own pure, strong instinct, and when to open yourself up to people that want to help you, that can see your work more clearly. So yeah, I'm not one of those people that bows to that sort of pressure.
Well, as a filmmaker, I feel it is very collaborative. So you have your head departments, people who do customs, who do design, and who do makeup, and they're artists on their own. So sometimes I have an idea, right? I have a vision and stuff, but they come with another idea, and I feel I want to honor that, because they are, if anything happens one day and they are nominated for something, it is their work. And you have to give them that sense of ownership if you want to get the fullest out of them. And I felt like dealing with my crew and people, if they understand that we are all together, we have the same vision to make a beautiful film, and we are clear on what we want on it, it's amazing. And you will change a lot. Sometimes you have a location, and they tell you the location is not there, and you are from Saudi Arabia. You know that. You know how hard it is sometimes to get locations, and people change on you and stuff like that. So it is, and now you need to change. And as a filmmaker, being adaptable is one of the most, skills that you need to acquire. You cannot just be stubborn and say no, which sometimes you have to. You have to stick to an idea if you feel it is very important, but also you have to honor other people's contribution, because it is a collaborative, and you don't know everything. As you go in a lonely place, and we are talking as directors being lonely, and you don't want to be that lonely. You want people to help you and love you and push you to succeed, and you won't succeed as an individual. As a filmmaker, you have to, the crew will carry you.
Well, now I'm embarrassed to say that I have been affected by that, because I think of myself as pretty damn tough. So on Boys, I had a female producer, I had men and women, and an amazing crew. And that movie is a complete reflection of my artistry and my desire. Very happy with it. But my third movie, I did say yes to a studio film. At first I said no to Carrie. And then I talked to Brian De Palma, and he said, I was like, I'm not going to remake your movie. And he was just like, you should do it. I was like, okay, if you really think so. So I went back to the studio and I said, Brian thinks I should do it, and if I can go back to the book and just do the book, then that will be great. Yes, you can do the book, you can have your writer, you can cast who you want. They just lied about everything. God, don't put this in the press. They didn't lie about everything. They lied about almost everything. No, but so basically they promised me the world, and it was not true. So we went down the road, and the most important thing is, because Brian said to me, if you're going to take that movie, what are you going to do about that ending? And if you know, Brian De Palma revolutionized the horror film with that jump scare. And I was like, I know. So I went to the studio, and I was just like, we have to spend time and money on this ending. I don't want to do this movie if we don't do something good with the ending. We will. Okay, it was one of the other things that they didn't do. But finally, I came up with a pretty great ending with my friend Scott Silver, who's a writer. And I pitched it to them, and they loved it. But they wouldn't do it because they had something in their mind they wanted to do, which was really dumb. So then we shot their really dumb idea, and they tested it, and it didn't work. So they were panicked. We had a release, and they said, what about your idea? And I was like, oh, sure, here's my idea. So I wrote it up, and they were like, okay, it's great, but. I was like, what's the but? And they were, because it was a birth scene. It was kind of like Alien and The Fly, and it was really fun. And they were like, well, I'm like, what? They were like, but. I'm like, what? They were like, where are you going to put the camera? And I was like, what do you mean, where am I going to put the camera? They were like, well, are you going to put the camera, are you going to put it on the, in the, at the, what are you trying to say? And I know these are not bad words, I get to say them. They said the cooter, the vajayjay. I just was like, what? I was like, is this like 1950? They couldn't say the word, and I'm not going to say it, but you all have one and know what it is. Then the next thing was, not only were you going to put the camera, which, can you do a storyboard? Right? So there was all this like hysteria around that female body part. And I was like, guys, I have one. I'm around them a lot. I've had naked scenes. I've done sex scenes. I was just like, where do you think I'm going to put the camera? You either put it here, looking down, or here, maybe here, but you don't put it there. Like, that's just not a good shot. So the amount of hysteria and drama that went around this, I know, like, I probably lost some, I don't know, I've gone gray or something over it. It was crazy. And that was an instance where I was so micromanaged, so controlled, so repressed. And people watch the movie and they're like, it doesn't feel like a Kim Pierce film. And there was a level of violence and a level of sexuality and a level of horror that was just stripped out of it every single day. So yeah, that's what happens. And it's not for lack of fighting, because I fought tooth and nail to the very end. And the real problem about fighting too much is you can destroy your career. And that is a really weird thing to say to you, but it's true. You can get to certain higher levels, and when you fight the good fight, you can get in trouble. So my thing is, don't do business with people like that. Just don't. Because if you can't fight and win, just don't. You don't want to fight a fight you're going to lose. So there. I'm the depressing one.
Over here, the other woman in white, as I think.
Hi, my name is Aisha. Just graduated college in May, and I'm from New York, but I now live in Abu Dhabi. This is a kind of very specific question, but I'm hoping all of you can provide some sort of answer. So I started filmmaking about a year ago, and I started a documentary because I felt like with the documentaries I made, the character, the story of the character was always so powerful that it carried the film. And I didn't have to worry about writing. And it wasn't narrative, it was documentary, so I felt like in terms of directing, it was easier for me, and I felt very comfortable. But now I'm working on a script, and it's narrative, and the experiences of the characters are very specific. And I know that writing is a process, and you write from what you know, but I don't know anything about these characters' experiences. And maybe, Nikki, you can speak about this because you made a film about Maori people, but if you don't have any real connection to the characters you're writing about and the stories that you're telling, how do you make the film authentic, and how do you carry the story in a way that's unique and develop your own artistic voice, but you're sort of separated from the characters because you have such a different experience? It's kind of I hope you can answer. I don't know.
Yeah, I can answer. I've done it a number of times. In fact, I love this. What I do in my work is generally work in cultures that aren't my own, and what I do is I go there, and I hang out, and I eat the food, and look at what is truthful, ask questions, and it's amazing because. There's, particularly when you work in Hollywood and you're surrounded by a very big film crew, there's an arrogance that can come with that. Like a film crew will go into town and everybody's just... I don't like that. But I love to take a film crew into a small place and record exactly like like you're making a documentary, because everywhere I look is the truth. I'm certainly not arrogant enough to think that because I'm a writer and director, I know what it's like to be. And I made a movie called McFarland in a Latino, a Mexican community about teenage Mexican field workers that were in a cross-country running team, all boys. Now, none of those things I knew anything about. I started running, so I now know about that. And I would just go to this little town and just hang out with everybody, and beautiful things are in the world. You know, beautiful things are in tiny places. You know, Whale Rider, it's the tiniest place in the world. But when I told that story honestly, like specifically, it became completely universal. That's the trick. Yeah. You know, the truth is there, and you have the skills as a documentary filmmaker. Just take those skills and apply them to this new challenge you have set yourself. That's what I would say.
I would say the human experience transcends across cultures and colors and races. And that is when you forget who's that person, race and color and who they are, and relate to them on that experience. Whatever that person, we all fall in love. We all suffer the death of a loved person. We all become like sad, like there is a universality on the human emotions. And you have to find something like this in your character. You have to understand their journey, regardless where they come from and what kind of dress they have, you have to understand what they go through. Because as a storyteller, it's not like you are telling visuals, and you are telling a human, like that person's struggle or victory or triumph. So you have to feel that. You have to be, I would say you have to go closer to your characters in a way that you have to see their hearts somehow. And that is when you can write that script and you can describe the situations that can move people and touch them and create that relationship between you and the audience. Because as a filmmaker, I know some filmmakers want to do films only for for art, but I think it is, we love to see our films in big screens and engage with audiences, and that is the love of cinema. So you have to have this kind of engaging with your audience, and you have to find that journey and understand it.
I love everything they've been saying. I also really believe you should go there. So I went, I think I said, with a group of transsexuals. Before I'd ever met transsexuals, I traveled with them. We went to the murder trial for Brandon. I met the people Brandon hung out with. I just lived in the town, and so many things came to me. And at some point, I read a beautiful essay in The Executioner's Song, I think by Norman Mailer, if I'm getting it right, when he says that if you study the truth long enough, you begin to know what might have happened. And that started happening to me because this was a murder and a murder trial. I just started knowing things. I got access to the Lana, who plays the girlfriend, and I videotaped her, and she thought I was Brandon for a moment, and then whether I seemed that way or not, that moment opened us up, and then she talked to me about something. Again, the problem was the solution. I said, when did you know that Brandon was a girl? And she said, oh, the minute I met him. I was like, I had to throw the script out. I was like, you knew Brandon was a girl the minute you met him? And she's like, oh, no, I didn't know until the very end. I was like, you just said you knew the minute you met him. Well, I knew, but I didn't know. And that was a problem, because I thought, I can't write a character who's so all over the place. And then I realized, oh, I have to write a character who's seems all over the place, but really isn't. She's in love with somebody, and she's lying to herself in order to hold on to her love. So that was the kind of thing that, had I tried to write the script from who I was and what I knew before going in without being untethered by the problem, the script wouldn't have been as good. So that's why I say, Keats talks about this, negative capability. It's just not having the answer sometimes is the solution. So that was one. The other thing was, I went to the court reporter, and she had the one audio tape of Brandon that existed when he was being interviewed by the police officer, which was kind of another rape. And I just listened to it over and over and over. And I don't know why, I just kept listening, but that made me see certain things that I put in the movie that were a bit irrational but made sense. So I think what Nikki's saying, what Haifa's saying, it's like, open yourself up, go all the way in. You don't know the outcome, but it will change you, and you will invent story from what passes through you, I think.
Over there, the end. Yeah. Lots of questions.
Hi, I'm Nito, and I'm a writer-director, and I'm male.
Are you?
Well, so far. So I'm writing a story of a refugee family of three sisters, the younger of who is Keisha's age from Male Rider. They're facing insurmountable social odds, much like Haifa, as film Wajda's character does. My lookbook features shots from Boys Don't Cry and Carrie, and my characters are navigating a landscape that they deeply, with every fiber of their being, believe is their home, but are told that it's not. Much like Anne-Marie's films. So to say that I'm
intro.
well,
Very
I mean,
nice.
but the point is that to say that I'm influenced by your films would be an understatement. But this is the first week that we're actually out with the project, and we are meeting with a spectrum of different responses, ranging from, good, you're giving a voice to women. It's like, dude, women already have a voice. They'll need me to give them a voice. But then on the other hand, on the flip side of that, a jury member who will remain unnamed said, what gives you the right to tell this story? And when I walked into the room, they were actually shocked that I'm male. So the question is, not so much about the writing of the story, because I guess, finding the emotional truth of the characters applies regardless of what their gender is and what mine is. But the question is then, how would you, as a man, I guess, go out and pitch a story that is essentially about female characters and is driven by female characters without having necessarily a mission that I want to change the world? Because this isn't why I'm telling the story. I'm telling the story because this is the story I want to tell.
I don't know. It's like how you're asking these women how we would pitch the story if we were a man? No,
Well, I'm just curious. I guess the question concisely is, okay. So as a
Are you asking you if you have the right to tell the story? I mean, what are you really asking us to weigh in on?
I guess what I'm asking you to weigh in on is from the perspective of a female writer-director being approached by a male writer-director telling a story about women, whether you would look at it necessarily differently or with, than you would if it were told by a female writer-director.
I mean, I don't want to be politically incorrect, and I'm very much a humanist, so I think everybody, look, I think all artists have the right to do anything they want, and I think a woman should tell any story she wants, and a man should tell any story he wants. I don't believe in legislating that at all. And yet, it's interesting, like I was explaining to these women that I just worked on I do some television that I love. I just worked on Dear White People, which is a black show, and I'm white. That's never, I mean, I was raised white, and even if I'm open-minded to, issues of black Americans, there is no way I really know on any level what it's like to be black. So my sense is a black person should tell that story before I do. But if they still really want me to come in because of some skill set I have, and I did have a skill set, I helped transform a performance, but I spent every single day hanging out on that set and shadowing the director, saying to him, I don't want to be crass, but because you're black and you have a black experience, I just need to assimilate as much as I can and know that I am what I am. So I guess that would be my thing, is I think if you're going to tell a story about another culture, right, women, hopefully there's a great deal of humility and a great deal of research and a great deal of understanding that you're going to do, because the truth is you're not a woman. There are things you will never know, and particularly when you're dealing with a marginalized group like women or people of color, and you're the majority group that has a lot of power, I understand why people are suspicious.
Yeah, and me too. I mean, I defend the right of any artist to speak on any topic, yourself included. But the test is going to be your work. isn't it? Your work is going to have to be so freaking good to satisfy, I don't know, 90% of this room. So if you are man enough for that challenge, and I hope you are, because the more men that really deeply explore the female experience, the better. So all power to you. You go. Yeah.
Thank you. Very unfortunately, we have to end. I just got the note slipped in. I made a father and son story. I'm not a father nor a son. I just wanted to add, and I believe very strongly people tell their own stories, and you obviously have something of you in that story. Doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man, there's something of you in it, and that's what you have to stay with and keep your instinct on. And I get asked all kinds of stupid questions, like why did I make a father and son story, and why, as if I don't have the right to do that, and you're going to get the same in a different way. But power to you. Thank you. It's really fantastic. I wish we could go for a lot longer, because I think there's a lot of great energy in this room, and you guys are just wonderful to listen to. But they're around for a few more days, so find them, speak to them, and thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How fun.
Yeah,